Hello, Detective Banks. When was the last time you saw your father?
Hello and welcome back to Quickflicks, and today we'll be talking about Spiral from the Book of Saw, the ninth entry into the Saw franchise. Working in the shadow of his father, an esteemed police veteran, Samuel L. Jackson, brash detective Ezekiel Zeke Banks, played by Chris Rock, and his rookie partner, played by Max Minghella, take charge of a grisly investigation into murders that are eerily reminiscent of the city's gruesome past. I'm going to be similar to a lot of other reviews and say not a lot of spoilers in this review because I don't want to spoil a lot of the twists. But I also want to talk about some of the spoilers because some of my thoughts do pertain to what happens in the film. So I'm going to first talk about my general thoughts about the film, and then I will have a spoiler section. So in case you guys have not seen the movie or maybe don't care enough to watch the movie and just don't care about spoilers, I will have a certain section of this video go into spoilers, okay? So we're not going to do spoilers yet, but I'm going to do my spoiler-free review right now. And then at a certain point, I'll tell you when I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So, in a general sense, I enjoyed the movie a bit. I don't think it's as good as some of the other Saw films, but I do think it does kind of breathe a little bit of life into the franchise. Apparently, Chris Rock, at one point in his life, thought of this idea for a Saw movie, and he brought it up to Twisted Pictures, and he brought it up to Lionsgate, and was like, hey, I want to make this film. It's a really cool idea, and I think it's a really cool idea for this franchise to do. So let's do it. And Twisted Pictures was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And it's actually a pretty decent idea. I like the idea of what this film was going for, and it kind of reminded me a bit of Saw 6 in terms of its social relevancy. Saw 6 was relevant in the sense that it was kind of a play on talking about the American Health Care Act, or the AHA, or the AHA, as I like to call it. At that time, people were talking about the American Health Care Act, and Saw 6 was basically about a healthcare insurance provider being tortured, right? In the same similar sense, we kind of get something like that in Spiral, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens in this. So all we know is that in the trailers, they talk about them targeting, cops, and so obviously it was going to be relevant to that part. So we'll talk a little bit more in the spoiler section about this. I'd say for the most part, Chris Rock is fine in the role. He does a really good job playing Ezekiel Banks. The slow descent into madness, trying to figure out who is the actual killer in this whole game. But personally, one of the things that I didn't really like is that this movie doesn't necessarily go into a downward spiral, if you know what I mean. When I look at a character like Danny Glover's character from the original Saw movie, you saw that he was very dedicated to finding who Jigsaw was, right? Even after he was kicked off the police force, he was still trying to figure out who he was. And so his descent into madness was that. I would have liked to have seen something similar to that with Ezekiel Banks and have the movie kind of center around that downward spiral of madness to figure out who is the killer, in a sense. I didn't necessarily get that. But I will say this is a really well-produced movie for the most part. I think the cinematography looks really beautiful at times. I think the set design is really good. The traps are nothing entirely memorable, but there are some ones that are, definitely squeamish. Even if it doesn't necessarily go for the big spectacle pieces of the past, it actually does have some interesting ones that pertain to the actual story of the plot. There's some pretty memorable ones, but I don't think most of the traps are going to be as recognizable from a distance, right? Because when you look at previous franchise entries, of course you'll remember some key traps, right? You'll remember the pain train from Saw 7. You'll remember the potato slicer from Jigsaw. Like, everyone will remember certain traps from certain movies, but there's not really a standout trap in this movie, probably until the end, which I think is probably for the best because, like, yeah, there's some decent traps in this, right? There are some gruesome traps. The gore effects are like chef's kiss. I think the gore effects are really good. Some of the trap sequences are okay. Some of them are kind of cool, I guess. But I actually kind of like the ending trap. Not going to detail what that has to pertain to. I think in a general sense, I think Spiral from the Book of Saw is a fine popcorn movie. I don't think it lives up to, say, Saw 2 or Saw 1, but it definitely starts its own thing, which is actually kind of cool for the most part. But I don't necessarily think it's quite memorable. There's some things I like about it, but I don't think it just has that enough of a punch. You know, it does have some really cool stuff. I just don't think it just lacks a little bit of a punch. And the ending is a little bit of a disappointment, even though I like the ending trap. Like, it's really good. But it just kind of blue balls it towards the end. And I'll talk a little bit more in the spoiler section, which we will be getting into now. So, if you haven't seen the movie, or if you don't care for spoilers or whatnot, stay if you want. But if you haven't watched the movie and you do care about spoilers and you don't want to be spoiled, go to this timestamp right here where I give my full conclusion. So, let's talk about Spiral. Spiral did something that I wanted from Jigsaw for that whole movie. If you remember, Jigsaw was marketed as a film that was about a copycat killer. And the unfortunate thing is that it kept living in the shadow of Tobin Bell's character. It kept living in the shadows of it because the main killer of that movie was a person that was another secret protege. And it kind of messed up the timeline a little bit. And I think the best thing that could have been done with this film is to not actually have the killer be a protege, but rather a film that is purely of its own essence. That is actually a person that is influenced by Jigsaw's ideology, established from the previous film. When you go back to the previous film in Jigsaw, they establish that there's a website that people can go to that can, like, recreate the traps, or that can, actually, like, like, learn about Jigsaw's whole ideology, right? And to be inspired by that and to do their own various nefarious things. So it's not just a few small select people anymore that can be Jigsaw. It's everyone that can be Jigsaw because of that website that was established in Jigsaw. Now, they don't explicitly say how the killer got to do all of this, right? They didn't explain any of that. I guess that'll be for a sequel thing. But I do think with the killer, I think it works for the most part. I still think he got what he learned off the internet. Again, if they ever do a sequel, the one thing I don't want to happen with a sequel is to say, hey, the guy that's the killer in this movie was actually another secret protege that is somehow connected to the original events of Saw. And it's like, no, I don't want any more complicated storylines, right? And I'm actually really happy that this film decides to do something new and original for this franchise, even if I don't think it works half the time. And so it's revealed to us that the main killer is a person that is within the actual police department, and it's his new rookie partner, which at first glance is actually kind of surprising, because up until that point, there are certain parts of this movie that kind of set up certain characters to be like, oh, this person could be the killer, or this person could be the killer. Sometimes, like, it would be kind of obvious that it could be the killer, right? Certain characters are like, oh, well, you're going to learn to be a team player, or you're going to be this, or you're going to be that, right? And there's certain, like, even, like, characters like Sam Jackson's character, gets set up to be a killer at one point. And you kind of question the entire movie. And it's like, oh, well, this person could be the killer, or this person could be a killer. And it becomes kind of a, for lack of a better term, Spiral from the Book of Saw becomes kind of like an Among Us game, but from Saw. Who among them is the killer? And every time like someone comes up with a possible answer, that person dies, which is interesting. But it is revealed that the main killer was the partner, and it was actually a really good twist. Like I almost didn't really see it coming. It was actually kind of cool, because I thought for a long second, that it was just going to be some random guy, or maybe it was going to be Dr. Gordon, or maybe it was going to be the person from Jigsaw. But no, it actually does its own original thing, and I really liked it. I honestly really liked it. But the twist, I also feel, is a little bit kind of weird, because, like, so the twist is that partway through the movie, the partner dies, right? And you think it's the new Jigsaw killer that did it. But apparently, no. It was the homeless guy from the beginning of the movie, and Charlie just took all of the skin off of this person. Like, apparently dental records aren't a thing. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how much time really passes. I think one of the major issues I have with the film is that you don't really get a sense of how much time really passes in this movie. And so the whole idea of this twist is a little bit kind of skewed. It depends on what you like, but it is a pretty decent reveal nonetheless. But the one thing, so let's talk about the full ending, right? I've already established that Charlie, the rookie cop that's with Chris Rock's character, is the killer. But it's also established after that point that Sam Jackson's character is basically the guy that kind of screws everything up in the police system. He covers up police brutality. He covers up so many different things, right? And he is part of a broken system. And part of the whole Jigsaw ideology for this new killer, Charlie, is that he's going to apply the same method to an entire system, which is timely for the most part, and I actually kind of like it. But my main issue with this ending is that it ends on a cliffhanger. I hate it. I hate it. I understand it's a typical Saw film, like, because of how it ends. It feels like another typical Saw film. It had all the opportunity to differentiate itself from the rest of the Saw franchise, but it leaves off on a cliffhanger that I feel like we're going to get more explanation of what happened, how this whole thing set up in a Spiral 2 or a Saw 10 or whatever, right? And I feel like what I hope for a sequel is that it doesn't do the thing that I think it's going to do, right? Which is to explain how Charlie is a protege of Jigsaw. That's the one thing I don't fucking want from a sequel to this movie. I don't want it. Let the past actually die, and let the actual legacy of the character live on through other killers that were inspired by it, right? And I really like the climax of the ending. My other issue with the ending is that it feels like, again, another typical thing that the Saw franchise does, and that is to edit in a recap of all the clues that led up to this point in the movie with the final shot of the movie. And I don't like that either, because it's like, it kind of treats its audience like they're dumb. Like, there's certain things that, like, if you were to take out those re-edited scenes towards the end, that kind of, like, you know, all these clues that led up to this particular moment, it actually enable a sense of rewatchability. But because you explain a lot of the things that led up to this moment, all these little hints and clues that built up to the ending, it doesn't add to a sense of rewatchability. Of course, it's entertaining. You still got Chris Rock that's entertaining. But my problem is that the ending is edited in a way that explains a lot of the things that led up to it, and it treats its audience like they're dumb. I think that's kind of my issue here. So all in all, I think Spiral from the Book of Saw is a pretty decent growing pain for the franchise. It has a little bit of room to grow for a sequel, but I think also it's a film that could have been helped by punching up a little bit more in terms of the tension, getting rid of some of the weird editing choices. I think it could have stood on its own as a brand new version of the franchise, and it does for the most part. But I think one of my main issues is that towards the end, it just feels like another Saw movie, and that's kind of my disappointment with it. It's kind of the same reason why Jigsaw is not necessarily one of my favorite films, but it just feels like another part of the franchise. Even though, yes, I liked Spiral even a little bit more than Jigsaw, I still kind of felt like there just needed to be a little bit more meat on the bones, as it were, right? And, you know, this movie is only an hour and a half long. They could have added another 15 minutes, or they could have, like, edited this film a little bit better, right? I think part of my issue is the editing, and part of my issue is the direction. The direction by Darren Bousman is fine, but I also think it could have been punched up by someone who is newer to the franchise history, right? I get the appeal of Darren Bousman because, like, for a lot of Saw fans, Saw 2 is among some of their favorite movies. And then Saw 3 and 4 was, like, a great companion piece, right? But I also feel like if you were to give this movie to someone who is fresh blood, I'm not saying I would do it because I don't have the guts to do it. But if someone was, like, newer to the franchise and actually had some new ideas, new thoughts and ideas of how to film this movie and how to make this film really punch, then it would probably be one of the best Saw movies ever. It's close to being one of the best Saw movies for me, right? It's close, but it just doesn't punch hard enough for me. That's just my opinion. I went to this movie with my brother, and he had a completely different opinion. He only watched the first Saw film out of all of them. And he went to go see this movie, and he thought it was actually kind of cool, and he liked it. Granted, he also only went to go see it because, 21 Savage did a song for the movie, and that's the only reason why he went to go see the movie. That's a whole other reason, but whatever. Point is, should you watch Spiral from the Book of Saw? Well, if you're a Saw fan, you might be a little disappointed by some of the twists that happened in this movie because of certain things that I'm not going to disclose here because we're out of the spoiler section. But I also think it is a pretty fresh, new way to look at the franchise, but I don't think it hits hard enough, right? But if you want to watch the movie, watch the movie. I'm not going to tell you either way, right? If you're already dead set on watching the movie, go watch the movie. If you're not, then you're not. So that's all I really have to say about this movie. And I'm going to give Spiral from the Book of Saw a C-. Thank you guys so much for watching my review of Spiral from the Book of Saw. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've watched it, what are your thoughts? Write them down in the comment section down below. Don't, berate other people for maybe not liking the film or maybe liking the film. Just, keep it respectful in the comment section. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.